we should start this podcast. I need to have a website for my band. Hey, I learned this thing. I was able to make this. Today I'm going to teach that to you. No matter how you do it, build things.
A person that is just one step ahead of a learner will teach them much better than a person that is an expert.
But if you don't show that to other people, nobody knows. It's kind of one of the only environments where I really truly feel like, man, I can talk to anybody here for, half an hour.
Completely life-changing. Right?
Completely life-changing, yeah.
Today at JSNation, the main JavaScript conference of 2024, I'm joined by Scott Tolinski, co-host of the Syntax FM podcast. Scott began his journey on YouTube in 2012, teaching web development through Level Up tutorials. 5 years later, the first episode of the Syntax FM podcast was released. We'll discuss how his passion for music led him to coding, the role of content creation and teaching in a developer's growth, and the story behind the creation of Syntax FM. I'm Adrian, and if my voice sounds familiar, you've most likely watched a video on the JavaScript Mastery YouTube channel, where we focus on teaching web development through project-based approach. And in the interview, Scott also shared his thoughts on the project-based development. So let's dive into the discussion.
Scott.
Hey.
So nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Formally, at least. We met yesterday at the conference, right?
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing great. First time in Amsterdam, getting to see everything, and just enjoying myself at the conference. Yeah.
First time GitNation conference in Amsterdam?
First time. Yeah. Incredible all around.
Look around. Like even this setting right here, the couch and everything, it's pretty well done.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I said it in the last interview as well, but something about Amsterdam gives it a special feel to the conference as well. I cannot pinpoint what.
Yeah.
But something about it. I'm not sure what is it.
There's vibes.
Vibes
for sure. Yeah.
Vibes are vibing. Yeah. That makes sense. Everything good so far?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I've had a great time, and not just seeing the talks, just being around the atmosphere and exploring the city, everything. Yeah.
And you gave a great talk. I listened to it. I'm going to ask you some questions about that later on.
Yeah.
But first, I want to know, how did you get started into web development?
A lot of kids in high school, I had a band.
Yeah.
I would make my band's website and maybe even going back to middle school.
Yeah.
First with Angel Fire or GeoCities, getting into like a Flash version of the website.
Yeah.
So you would just do that over and over again. And we had like a guest book and things like that. So it started first and foremost with for me, a need I had. I need to have a website for my band. I have to learn, how do I get audio on that website? How do I have some kind of back and forth communication on that website? And all of those things led me to explore the tech in a natural way. And that just really led to just a love and passion for the ability to create. Yeah.
So passion projects, hobby projects, right?
Totally.
Doing the stuff you love. It's the way I would recommend somebody to do it as well.
Totally. Yeah.
It's not the only way, but it's the best way, in my opinion, to actually learn something properly and to not get bored and to get out of touch with everything, right?
Anytime you're trying to learn anything, as long as that passion is pushing you forward, and it doesn't have to be a passion for the code, it has to be a passion for the thing you're trying to build, the thing you're trying to accomplish. That'll drive you into learning way more than you could possibly learn.
Exactly.
Just by studying the docs or anything. Yeah.
Without it feeling like work.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you've been doing that for some time, built a couple band websites, right?
Yeah.
And you started teaching?
Yeah, so
creating video tutorials?
Yeah, it's funny. I went to school for music and video production at the University of Michigan, and I was studying music to become a producer, work in music production, more multimedia stuff. And again, through that, I was doing a lot of even music programming. So to become, from going to music to web dev full time, took a realization that the thing I really like about what I'm doing is when I'm making the website for the thing I'm doing. That's the time that I'm having the most amount of fun in the work I'm trying to produce. And I was also just frankly, just comfortable doing it. So for me, it was that realization. And once I had that ability to say, all right, this is what I want to do, just went for it. I got my first dev job and I worked building websites for an agency. And from there, it was early days of YouTube, and there's maybe 1 or 2 channels that were doing web dev tutorial content. And there was nothing on the stuff that I was working in. And that was even basics of WordPress and Drupal, just really basic CMS topics. And so for me, it was like, I could just teach what I'm doing every day at work. I sit down all day at work. I do one thing in Drupal. Why can't I just turn my camera on and teach that, put it up on the internet? Then it's not stowed away in some obscure forum post that I'm having to look up for the next time I need to do this. So I just started with that. And next thing you know, I'm cranking out 9 videos a week of just stuff I do at work all day.
9 videos a week.
Yeah, I was doing 3 videos Monday, 3 videos Wednesday, 3 videos Friday, and they were about like 10-minute long tutorials on one specific topic. Today, we're going to install Drupal 8. Installed it, that's the end of the video.
And when was that? What year, if you remember?
So this would have been 2011.
Oh my God.
I founded, well, I got my first job in 2011. I started making videos at the end of 2011, and then I didn't really publish until February of 2012. So in February 2012 is when I finally got out of my head to be like, you know what, like I've been making this stuff, now I need to like actually push it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started it in February of 2012, and yeah, just started cranking away on it. And next thing you know,
Full time or?
no. So even up until 2015, I was working agency jobs. I worked for various agencies, and I worked for Ford, doing web design or web development for some internal projects for them. And I was just doing it nights and weekends, just grinding away. Yeah, making a lot of content.
I want to dive a bit deeper into that, if you're okay. So you were cranking content even 2011, 2012 when you were still working.
Totally.
So you're kind of maybe even learning some new stuff yourself and doing some stuff on the job, and then creating some videos around it, right? You're kind of
Almost
fusing
exactly.
the two.
Yeah, almost exactly. Where I was either exploring topics at work, and maybe not even things I was doing at work. Let's say at some point I was just churning out CMS-based sites. But in my spare time, because I was really fast at doing that, I could explore Backbone.js or Angular.js at the time, or Ember, and take these topics that were like, oh, these are just like kind of hobby kind of explorations that I'm doing. And as a way of learning it better, I just teach the thing I learned that day. Hey, I learned this thing. I was able to make this. Today I'm going to teach that to you. Beginner mindset,
Crazy.
Right?
Exactly the same for me.
Nice.
Exactly the same. Like I figured if I can teach somebody something in the simplest possible way, only then do I fully understand it myself, right? So I started the same way, kind of while I was still working, just trying to create video tutorials, which might sound counterintuitive at first. Like, why are you trying to create something that you just done on the job yourself that day? So I think this is a great point to discuss a bit to everybody listening and talking about it, maybe to get them to try to do that and not be scared, right? It takes a bit of a step ahead to put yourself out there and start creating videos, right?
It does. But at the end of the day, you know, nobody can understand the true mindset of somebody who has no idea what they're looking at when they're looking at a new technology, other than the person who just had no idea what they were looking at. Because oftentimes, like the big problem I had with a lot of tutorial content, I'll remember this very clearly, even deeper into my time making tutorials, maybe even like 2016, all the Redux content at the time, teaching Redux. It was like Redux was seen as the scary thing because Redux felt heavy. It felt like this weird process. And a lot of people weren't acknowledging that.
Redux was my kryptonite.
Oh my God.
Redux was the toughest thing for me. You hit it on the spot.
Yeah, and a lot of the creators were like, oh, you have to do this, then touch this, then do this, and do this. And it's just like, but why am I, you know, as a novice to Redux, like it all feels very overwhelming to me in terms of why I have to do that. So for me, it was always like taking those aspects and finding the way of distilling it down to that. I know nothing about why I'm doing this or how I'm doing this. And let me just give you my raw ideas of why this is happening, but from a technically sound perspective, and then teach you your way through it. So that way you don't feel less than for not getting it, you know?
Yes. So just to reiterate, like it was the same thing for me. It seems counterintuitive. But a person that is just one step ahead of a learner will teach them much better than a person that is an expert.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I want everybody that listens to this conversation to take something out of it, right? Which brings me to the next point, which is just how put yourself out there and how to make yourself a developer that's actually in demand. That a lot of people watching either want to get their first job or maybe they want to upskill, get to mid to senior positions. What is the secret sauce?
I'll tell you what, having a YouTube channel with 200,000, 300,000 followers on it is always a plus, right? There were so many interviews that I went at when they found out in the interview that I had this channel, they would look it up later.
Yeah.
Inevitably be impressed that it exists.
Immediate, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the big thing is consistency, right? The one thing that always throws people off, when especially job interviews, when people are looking at your resume, and let's say you have a blog, that blog has 2 posts on it, and one post is from 2 years ago, and one post is from 5 years ago, right? You could do 1 post a month, and that consistency shows that you're at least like having some ability to distill your thoughts in a way. You don't have to do that kind of stuff, but it helps. It also helps just to like be able to teach, right? Honestly, I was in a job interview once, and they'd asked me my thoughts on a specific technology, and I brought a different technology to the table. I said, "Oh, have you considered using?" At the time, it was this grid framework for SAS called Suzy, made by Miriam Suzanne, and I showed them, "Here's why Suzy is better than what you're using," and they were like, "Oh." Yeah, I get it.
Right?
Yeah, I get that it's better because you were able to distill that in a way that like really taught me. So I think the practice that you get from not necessarily even making videos, but just the practice that you get from being able to talk about technology in general through blog, through video, whatever, really is a big skill in terms of how you can communicate to fellow developers.
The more you do it, the better you become at it.
Yeah.
And also, when you decide to put yourself out there, you actually have to do some prep work.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's something that pushes you to maybe stay up to date. And I couldn't agree more. So personal branding matters a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And skills matter as well, right? But if you cannot portray your skills to the outside, are they really there? That's the question.
Yeah.
Employers cannot see them, right?
Yeah. And people get weird about that. They don't want to market themselves.
Oh yeah.
I know, firsthand, a lot of people, they feel uncomfortable even like talking about their abilities as if they have some sort of like special or interesting skill.
Yeah.
But if you don't show that to other people, nobody knows,
Yeah, but it's tough because you put yourself out there in the spotlight, right? So Scott, like, are you an influencer, right? Are you a developer or an influencer, right? That's what people are faced with.
I know. Yeah, no, and the influencer thing is so weird now because it feels like there's such a, it sounds like a slam to call somebody an influencer or something. When in reality, I've always just like, man, I'm a creator, a maker,
Exactly.
I build things. I learn through building things, and then I show people how I built them. And to me, that's what it's about,
That's, in my opinion, what every single person should do. Every single developer that wants to advance their career, it should not be their sole purpose, but it should be there alongside what they're doing.
Totally,
right?
yeah.
You had a talk about using just native browser APIs.
Yeah.
A bit. How does that come into the picture? Like, do you think that we should be using all of those libraries, frameworks, and stuff like that, or should we use more of what the browser native APIs offer?
Well, I think it's getting better all the time, right? And I think that's really the problem, is that people get kind of set in the way they do things. And a lot of developers learn web development now through React or through a JS framework. Yeah. And the tools have evolved beyond the stuff that we used, like the reason why we had to use React for everything, or even before that, why we used Angular or Backbone, was because the browser couldn't do many of the things that it can do now. And not to say that we shouldn't use those frameworks, because ultimately what I'm doing is I'm augmenting how I work in my frameworks with browser APIs, because the browser can do a lot for you, and it can do it better than your JavaScript framework most likely will be able to do it. Yeah. So if you can avoid that step, you're shipping less code, you're building more accessible applications, and it's just easier overall, because honestly, the browser APIs tend to function really well in a nice, simple way. So yeah, I'm all about it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of students approach me, and when they first dive into React, they have trouble differentiating whether a use state is a JavaScript thing or is it a React thing. It's sometimes tough, right? And a lot of people also haven't even been when there were lifecycle hooks, events, and stuff like that in React, right? Class-based components, remember that? So what do you think about that? Should they approach from a more kind of JavaScript structured way and then moving to React, or is it maybe okay to start with React and then figure your way around it?
I think it's okay to start with React, as long as you're asking yourself, like, why am I doing this? One of the first talks I gave way back when I talked a lot about comments I would get when I was teaching React specifically. One of those comments I got a lot, was people saying like, why does React call array iteration map instead of for each.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, because it's returning an array.
Yeah,
but people aren't asking themselves why it's doing that. They're just like, oh, React, if you want to loop in React, you just call it .map.
Exactly.
But they don't know that's a JavaScript method to output an array, and that React requires it to be an array because of how the renderer works. But, I think people just need to ask themselves when they're doing things like React, like, why am I doing this? Or what this is? If it's something is named sort of interesting or non-obvious, like there's probably a reason for that. And it probably goes into more of JavaScript. So honestly, personally, I think people these days probably need to be using a framework of some kind. But you shouldn't be locked into that way of thinking. Especially like with React, it does everything the React way. And there are other frameworks that do things more the web way. And then there's web components, which work really well in all scenarios. And I just think we're in a different situation now than we were when React first came out. Yeah.
So leverage the libraries, the frameworks, the tools, but still try to understand, at least when in the situations when you need to understand the deeper things and the concepts behind it. Right?
Yeah, first and foremost, build things. That's it.
Yeah.
No matter how you do it, build things. Even if it's with React and all your framework tools, whatever you're using, build things. And then as you go deeper in your journey, you can explore a little bit more of the web fundamentals, why things are the way they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So build, and then would you say, you wouldn't say copy and replicate what you are doing, right? Maybe try to take it and then tinker with it a bit, change it a bit.
Yeah, everything is all about, you. I can't decide what you're interested in, right? Like one of the first projects I did in Framework Meteor was I built a Kung Fu movie database for myself. I wanted to track which Kung Fu films I had seen from the Shaw Brothers studio. And I was like, well, this is a great opportunity. I'm getting to work with an API. I'm working with a database. And that pushed me to learn the UI. It pushed me to learn the whole framework, everything I wanted to have in that. But that example wouldn't have pushed anyone else to learn unless they were into that very specific niche. So like, start first with like, what's something I would like to have, and then implement that. Instead of starting with the tech, start with the passion. Yeah.
And while you're doing that, share your progress. Share what you're doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, the Twitter is pretty good, LinkedIn as well, right? Or just YouTube as well if you're
YouTube, and live streaming, Twitch, you got all that stuff. I think that one thing that people get hung up on in that regard is that people think, why would anybody want to watch what I'm learning? Yeah. In reality, it's not about you. It's about, hey, I'm learning this thing, and maybe somebody else is learning that thing too. They want to see the thought process that goes on there. They want to see how that person's brain is working when they're trying to solve these problems of things they don't know, and maybe they're even trying to help. I found online communities to be really supportive in that regard, where people are really quick to give advice or to give help especially when you're live streaming, and you got to be cool with that. You got to be cool with getting feedback on the fly. Yeah. And
as discussed, like if you're just one step ahead, that's already enough.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And what do you think about podcast as a medium? Let's dive into that. Okay. Syntax FM. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So you know what? I I've been a podcast fan, like way before we started Syntax, and so I listened to a lot of podcasts. And just like before I started my YouTube channel, I watched a lot of YouTube. So it's really easy to consume a lot of this stuff and mentally say, all right, this is what I love or don't love about some podcasts. I really love that I can consume podcasts in these ways. I love it when they're fun. I love it when they're engaging. I love when I can come out of it with something new. And so when Wes and I came up with Syntax, we both had a big old list of things that we liked and didn't like in podcasts. And so we sat down and we said, if we were to do a podcast, which of these, like, how would we build this and what would we want it to look like? And we both came away with it needs to be engaging, it needs to be fun, it needs to be educational first and foremost. Okay. We're not a drama podcast where we're giving you something that you can take with you and that you can learn about, right? Yes. But we don't want it to be dry. We don't want to put you to sleep. It's not a Fall Asleep With Us podcast. So, me personally, I just really liked the medium overall. And so starting a podcast is something I'd always really wanted to do. So when Wes and I connected on that. It was a really easy decision to make it. Yeah.
How did that connection happen? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. Wes and I were in like a mastermind group. You know what that is?
Which one? Is it the mastermind or?
So there's a lot. There's a lot of mastermind groups, and it's funny. I just applied to be in a mastermind group, and I got denied on that application. And like the very next week, I get a message from a guy, Josh Owens, who worked on Meteor educational tech.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, would you be interested in meeting with me to talk about educational content creation in a mastermind group? And then the exact same week, that guy got a message from Wes saying the same thing. And then I got a message from Wes. And we were all just kind of bouncing around. And next thing you know, we had a group of like, it started initially 5 of us, but it eventually became 4 of us. Joel from Egghead, and then Wes and I, and then Josh. Yeah. And we'd meet once a week, and we'd have a topic. And it was just show up at a Zoom call, chit chat about what a given topic was that day. All right, today we're going to talk about designing our product page. Okay. Let's rip apart Scott's product page. Let's do a complete breakdown of what's not good about Scott's product page. Yeah. And it was just like a nice share of ideas from people that all had different expertise. Like I was there to teach the other 3 guys how to do YouTube better because I was the most successful at YouTube. Yeah. Wes was the most successful at sales. Joel had built Egghead. So that was like a big tutorial service.
So just share, at the time it wasn't a podcast, It wasn't public, it's just sharing knowledge.
Just hanging out.
Yeah, hanging out.
Yeah, it's really just hanging out. And Wes and I just vibed really well from the start. So, we did that for about a year, just chit-chatting, meet once a week with these folks and you end up, getting pretty tight. Yeah. And then I don't know who came up with the idea first, but we both had an idea to do a podcast. And around 2016, we had the idea and it just kind of sat on the shelf. I was working at a startup at the time. Yeah. This startup was not doing well. Poor management, just a really bad company to work for. Yeah. It happens. I had signed on, so I was committed to it. And then my son was born. Yeah. You get this like clarity that you get from having kids. And I remember my son was born on like, he was born in the middle of the week. And then on Sunday, so not even a full week later, my manager was calling me, hey, this feature is totally broken. We're talking about an alpha site that no one's using. Yeah. It's a prototype that we're using to sell to investors. Yeah. And I'm getting, I just had a baby and you're messaging me like that. So I quit on the spot.
On the spot.
I sent Wes a message the next day. I was like, hey, dude, we should start this podcast. We'd already been kicking. We already had a name for it. We already had like all the stuff down. So we just like, all right, let's actually do it like this week. Next thing you know, it started the very next month. We started recording. And then the rest is history. Yeah, first episode went really well, and yeah, people latched onto it.
Would you ever have said that something like that would happen out of joining a group with
no
4 people?
It's all kind of like
it's not something you can predict, right?
No. And in fact, the thing is that it all was set up through the years and years of content, working on content, establishing those skills, building my teaching ability, which led me to that mastermind group, which led me to meeting these folks, and then led us to having like a
we're going to keep repeating that in this interview. Yeah. Content, it matters, right? It opens the doors that you don't even know could have been open.
Endless amount of doors. Yeah.
Possibilities, doors, jobs, opportunities. Yeah. Even leading you to not want jobs anymore and to create something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's led me here. Before doing that, I was just doing YouTube. I never done any public speaking at all since before the podcast.
Completely life-changing, right?
Completely life-changing, yeah.
And no more bosses calling you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I get to be in charge of what I'm doing, and I get to choose. I get to choose exactly what I get to explore. Now, granted, you have to pay attention to what the audience is interested in and everything like that. But at the end of the day, if I'm not interested in it, I'm not going to be good at teaching it. I'm not going to be excited. I'm not going to honestly have the drive to get deep into it the way you need to. Yeah.
So moving forward, that's been 2015, you said?
Yeah. So the podcast launched in 2017.
2017. Yeah. Okay. So that's been a long time now. So how has it been progressing? How many episodes have been go out? A lot. Right?
We started at 1 a week, 1 hour long episode a week. It was really well received. So we went to 2 episodes a week. And then we brought on an interview episode, so then 3 episodes a week. Now we're up to like 800, well, almost 800 episodes now. So I honestly couldn't tell you we're at 7 something right now. It's getting really close to 800. And
how much time does it take to produce an episode?
It takes a day. Oh, no, a day to produce 3 episodes. Okay. So we'll do 3 of them in a day. Usually is how it goes. But the amount of time it takes to research is my entire career, you know? So when we're sitting down to do a topic, Wes and I are thinking like, what's something that either one of us is knowledgeable in or that we're excited about, that we've been doing over the past couple of months? How can you put together a way to teach it, or is this an interesting topic? So we very rarely start with like, what does the world need in a podcast right now? It's more or less like,
what do we want to talk about?
Yeah, what do we want to talk about? It's you know, the thing I always liked about it from the start was you're just hanging out with a buddy talking about the thing you like. It's like going to the bar and just chit-chatting about something, you know? And that's kind of the initial vibe, but that's how I look at it. Because we both are just like, we're both just tinkerers and makers, you know?
Maybe you invite the third person right here. It's not like hundreds of thousands of people listening. It's you, Wes, and then that other person listening, right?
Yeah, and that was the whole thing with the interview episodes. You know, a lot of podcasts use interview episodes as like a PR tour. We get hundreds of these messages saying, can so-and-so from this big company come on the podcast? We're like, no. Because specifically, we don't ever want it to be a PR tour. It's not an ad. It's not a place to push your product. We want real makers coming on talking about something they built. And if you are coming on from a company, we want you to talk about the code and the craft and like the actual technique. We don't want to hear about your product launch, you know?
It's developers, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but developers can very easily sniff out marketing instantly. It's crazy. Right?
Yeah, even a little hypersensitive.
Just a bit. But I'm sure you have a team maybe right now helping with editing and stuff like that, right? But at the time, maybe you can tell me how it was before and how it is now. It took a lot of time. What about some hobbies or extra activities? Was it more demanding than having an actual job, or did you actually have some time to do some fun stuff as well?
I had a lot of time to do some fun stuff. It even kind of goes along with the creation of my channel. So I've been a dancer. I've been breaking, which is like breakdancing for 20 years now. And at a high level. So I was entering competitions all over the US. I was in a bunch of really bad music videos. I danced for the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Lions and stuff. And
I'll have to go find that. I'm sure it's online.
Oh, it's definitely online because I'm still doing it. And in February of 2012, right before I started my YouTube channel, I got a bad concussion. I dropped myself on my head and really was unable to do like physical activity. So I'm kind of hyperactive, you know? So by March, I had the YouTube channel started like publishing videos, 9 videos a week or whatever, just because you
couldn't move, but you had to do something, right?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, my release schedule was my dance practice time. That's when I used to go to dance. So once I healed from that injury, it was a little bit more of like, how can I fit my hobbies back into my coding, because my YouTube channel sort of filled that space. And now it's a lot different because I'm older. My body doesn't tolerate it as well. But I still go to dance once a week now. And it's like, you're hanging out with buddies, you're listening to music, you're being creative, you're exploring movement, you're being athletic. So yeah,
it's great to have a hobby, but what I think is even better is having a job, quote unquote, that you find rewarding and that you find yourself in. And based on our conversation right now, it does seem like you found yourself in development.
Totally. And I have a hard time shutting it off. We're like, I want to work on side projects all night long. I can't do that. And I as much as I want to, but I could. Like on any flight that I'm on, one of the pure joys I get about flying is that I can just sit in front of my computer and knock something out. We went to React Miami, and on the flight to Miami from Denver, I built an entire app for my dancing. I like showed up and Wes was like, "You built this on the plane?" I was like, "Oh yeah." I get really hyper focused. Yeah,
that's the cool thing about web development in general. Just being able to just create something new, right?
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, all of that makes a lot of sense. Creating content, coding alongside of it. And how do you think conferences fall into place here when it comes to creating content and developing and just improving yourself as a developer overall?
Yeah, conferences are an incredible burst of energy. And you know what? As a solo, a solo creator for a long time, it was difficult to be able to go to a lot of conferences unless I was speaking.
Yeah.
But every time I was able to go to a conference, it was this renewed sense of like, you're around your type of people.
Yeah.
You're around the type of...
they all have their laptops, they're coding, they have stickers there, right?
Yeah, everyone has the same energy, the same excitement for what they're doing. And it's kind of renewing in many ways, you know? Yeah.
It's hard to find a place where you just meet with people that are like-minded and have the shared goals, especially with something as geeky as coding can be to the outside population, right?
Yeah.
But when we come to a conference, it's so rejuvenating to see.
It feels like a celebration, but it also, the thing I like most about it is that everyone is really open to getting to know you, you know?
Yeah.
You can chat with anybody and everybody, and it's kind of one of the only environments where I really truly feel like, man, I can talk to anybody here for, half an hour, whatever, and get into a conversation like that.
Celebrating JavaScript, React, and all those things. Did you get a chance to hear the opening ceremony song at JS Nation?
Oh, no, I didn't hear it. I didn't get here in time.
Yeah, you'll hear it online, I'm sure. It was pretty crazy. Hearing a song about JavaScript.
Oh, nice.
Just imagine that.
Nice.
Pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, so it can be a great outlet just to create some stuff, to learn some more stuff, and to keep yourself updated.
Yeah.
Great. And what better place than Amsterdam?
Yeah,
right?
no kidding, right?
Pretty cool. Awesome, Scott. It was great meeting with you.
Yeah, likewise.
And great interview.
Hey, thank
Loved
you.
everything you do, and keep it up.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great one.